Hey, what's going on YouTube? Aura Storm here with another deck profile today. Today we profiling prediction dolls, or I believe they're referred to as Sybil Shadolls in the OCG. If you don't know what prediction princesses are, they were an archetype played by one of the characters in the recent Arc 5 anime. It involves this monster, Prediction Princess Tarote, and basically a lot of flip effects, shenanigans, Book of Mooning, etc. It naturally fits with Shadolls simply because they have flip effect monsters in their archetype, and the engines really function pretty well together. So anyway, let's go ahead and get to the deck profile. So first off, one copy of Big Daddy BLS. BLS is probably obviously a staple in Shadolls and Burning Abyss to an extent, but in this particular list between Manju and Tarote, Trey, you have a lot more light targets for BLS. You don't fear it as much. Two copies of Effect Veiler. I prefer Veiler over Breakthrough Skill typically in Shadolls. I understand why people main deck Breakthrough Skills because, you know, Constellar, with Ptolemos being a thing, pretty much every rank 4 deck can make Diamond, and Diamond is a B. So, but I still prefer Veiler over Breakthrough Skill, in my opinion. 3 copies of Manju, the 10,000 Hands. You really got to have this. I like having it at 3 because I have 6 total targets to search with it. And it's also a light target, which means you can use it as fusion material for your construct plays. 3 copies of Mathematician, staple in Shadolls, you know, don't really need to talk too much about it. Now, this is the main reason you play the deck. This card is called Pot of Taboos. It's a level 9 rock-type flip effect monster that is, you can activate one of these effects, but you can only use this effect of him once per turn. You can either draw 2 cards, which is Pot of Greed, turn all spells, trap cards to field to the hand, Giant Trunade, show all monsters opponent controls, Regeki, and look at your opponent's hand and shuffle one card from their hand into their deck, basically like a trap dust shoot. So this card is one of the reasons why you play the deck. It's a level 9, which means you can use it as the full tribute for Tower Tray. Obviously, you can use your Shadolls in hand or your fusion monsters, you know, for the materials for Tower Tray. But preferably, you want to be using Taboos because you can instantly get your Tower Tray on the field and then your Taboos set up. And you can also send this as fusion material for Shekanaga to get it in the graveyard, so you can set up your Tower Tray plays easy. It's one of the reasons you play the deck, and especially with Tower Tray. I mean, even if your opponent tries to Regeki your field, this thing is still going to resolve, which I'll get to that later. 2 copies of Prediction Princess Koinura. Her effect basically when she's flipped, you can special summon 1 level 3 or higher flip monster from your hand or deck, but you can't activate anything but Prediction Princess monsters. Typically, you're going to want to grab a Taboos from your deck, even if your opponent, it's a 3k butt, so either they have to attack into it to make sure its effect next turn doesn't resolve, or they let it sit there and it resolves. So it's a 3k monster, so they're going to have to attack into it most of the time and take damage in order to get it off the field or have some kind of spell and trap removal. So that's what Koinura is basically here for, is getting Taboos out of our deck. And for the Shadoll engine, 2 copies of Beast. I've always tweaked between 2 and 3, but for like if you're kind of running like 2 little engines together, I think Beast is the better number. It can get a little cloggy at 3 copies. 2 copies of Dragon. I don't like back row, and Dragon is a 1900 beater, so I feel like I always run 2 dragons in my Shadoll list. 2 copies of Falco. You don't really have room for the 3rd one, and I didn't really ever find it necessary in testing. 2 copies of Hedgehog. Especially since we're running 2 engines together, I feel like I want to have that second Hedgehog so I can search my fusion spells. And 2 copies of Squamata. I've never really, a lot of players, I know they like 3, but personally I've always felt that 2 Squamata is kind of the ideal number. And for the last 3 monsters, 3 copies of Prediction Princess Tarot Tray. So it's a main effect you care about. It has 3 different effects. During either player's turn, it's a Book of Moon. And it can do the reverse. It can change a face-down monster to attack position. So if you have this and Taboos on the field, which you normally will, your opponent tries to Regeki, you can just chain Tower Tray's effect. And even though Taboos has left the field, it has flip face up, which means its effect will resolve, even though it's not even the graveyard. So the great about this is your opponent tries to wipe your board, it doesn't get them anywhere because they're still going to lose their entire board, or something or other is going to resolve. So it's also it's a Book of Moon and the reverse, basically. So like you can Book of Moon a monster or flip one of your monsters face up. It's really also good with the Shaddoll monsters since you can trigger their effects. And the other effect is that you can, during your end phase, you can special summon 1 flip monster from your hand or graveyard in face down defense position. Typically, when you drop this, you're going to bring a pile of taboos out of your graveyard because this is what you're going to summon Tower Tray with in an ideal scenario. Now for the spells, 3 copies of El Shaddoll Fusion. You can always kind of tweak the Shaddoll spell lineup, but I feel that there's a lot of decks that don't tend to not use the extra deck quite a lot. Obviously, as we get more Pendulum decks, that might change because as we get more Pendulum decks, more Pendulum monsters count as summoned from the extra deck when they're brought from there. So obviously that could be subject to change, but you can kind of tweak your fusion spell ratio as you see fit. 2 copies of MST. I always main deck 2 MSTs, regardless of what people say of the format. I like 2. 3 copies of Prediction Ritual. This is the card obviously to summon Tower Tray. The other thing that's really nice is during your main phase, it's like a breakthrough skill. You can banish it from your graveyard to add a Prediction Princess monster from your deck to your hand. So even if your Tower Tray bites the dust, you can still search. 1 copy of Regeki. So pretty much a staple in this format. I mean, I personally at regionals last weekend just picked up my own first copy, so I'm glad. So it's pretty much you're going to be running this in most decks nowadays. 2 copies of Shaddoll Fusion. Like I said, depending on where you're at in your format, you might play Shaddoll Fusion or L. Just depends. 1 copy of Shaddoll Core. I didn't have room for the second copy since I do run Greasta and Anoyatilis, but I feel like 1 is kind of like the usual Shaddoll ratio. So I have kind of like 2 in some builds. And last, 2 copies of Sinister Shadow Games. I feel like 3 has always been way too much in testing. I feel like 2 is just kind of the right number. Now for the I'm not going to go too much into the side. You can kind of view it for yourself. 1 copy of El Shaddoll Anoyatilis. This is here basically to shut down decks that use a lot of. It's good in the Necros Mirror. It's good and it's good against in the Telenite matchup. So I really like Anoyatilis. 3 copies of Construct. She's your Queen Bee. Your main monster. You're going to probably need to run this at 3. Sort of like Dante. If you could run 10 copies, you probably would. 1 copy of Greasta. I actually like Greasta. Sometimes Window's not quite enough to slow your opponent down in certain matchups. So that's where Greasta comes in. Greasta's really good in a lot of particular matchups at getting over, stopping your opponent's plays. Same thing goes for the 2 copies of El Shaddoll Shekanaga. Especially in this deck, you're being able to dump taboos for the fusion material with Shaddoll Fusion is really nice. And being able to stop monster effects is really key, especially in a fast-paced format like this. 2 copies of Window. I've never really felt the need for 3 windows in Shaddolls, but it's like nice to have that second copy just in case. For the Synchros, 1 copy of Armatis. The reason I run Armatis in here is because I have more level 3s like between Koingma and Mathematician than your traditional Shaddoll deck, and I like Armatis in a lot of It really wins you games in a lot of different matchups. 1 copy of Black Rose Drag. You make this to clear the board before you make an OTK push. 1 copy of Clearing Synchro Dragon. This card is really good in the mirror match and keeping your Tower Trays and all your high-level monsters safe from monster effects. 1 copy of Star Eater. This is mostly for towers. It's a concession as long as towers is a thing. You got to have Star Eater. 1 copy of Castel, the Skyblaster Musketeer. Only run 2 rank 4s, even though you can with Manju you can kind of make rank 4s easier. I just don't have room for anything other than Castel and Exciton Knight. So anyway, guys. Let me know what you think of this deck profile. And this week is going to be a little bit different since I've been uploading as frequently lately. I'm going to have, count them, 4 videos this week. So stay tuned for that. So anyway, guys, as always, thank you guys for watching. This is Aurastorm signing out.